Captain Ryan Caldwell felt a mixture of awe and trepidation as he stepped into the radiant foyer of the Celestial Palace on Velmara Prime, a sprawling architectural marvel carved from shimmering crystal-like material. The walls glowed with an inner luminescence, each facet capturing and refracting starlight from the system's 3 suns, bathing the corridors in waves of soft color that ebbed and flowed like a living tapestry. His pulse quickened at the unfamiliar sights. Here, on this distant world, he was an emissary of Earth, invited by King Eldarin himself. Ryan was a decorated Earth soldier, known for his unwavering courage and expertise in interstellar diplomacy. Tall, with a wiry build that belied a core of hardened muscle, he carried himself with a disciplined grace. Scars from past conflicts tracked along his brow and cheek, faint lines telling silent tales of sacrifice and relentless determination. Despite his outward composure, he could not help but feel the gravity of the moment. Velmara Prime was no ordinary planet, and this invitation from King Eldarin was no trifling matter. A pair of ornately armored royal guards, their breastplates forged from the same crystalline substance that adorned the walls, saluted Ryan and then guided him through a set of gilded doors. A long hallway stretched ahead, lined by statues of Velmaran heroes, towering figures, with elongated limbs and regal features, each carved in breathtaking detail. As Ryan passed each statue, he felt the weight of centuries pressing upon him. Battles fought, alliances forged, and secrets whispered among the ancient halls. At last, he reached a towering set of double doors carved from a dark, dense wood native to Velmara Prime. Intricate inlays of gold filigree and emerald gemstones shimmered in swirling patterns, depicting the legendary cosmos-bound journeys of Velmaran royalty. The guards motioned for him to pause while one of them stepped forward to announce his presence to the king. Bracing himself, Ryan stepped inside and was struck by the sight of the throne room. Overhead, a vaulted ceiling soared hundreds of feet high, supported by grand columns that spiraled like twisting vines, their exteriors embedded with star-shaped crystals. Pearlescent floors reflected the prismatic lights, giving the impression of walking on liquid starlight. And there, upon a raised dais, sat King Eldarin, an imposing figure with robes of deep amethyst, a gilded crown perched upon his brow, and piercing golden eyes that seemed to look straight into Ryan's soul. At the king's side, nestled in an ornate hoverchair, was Princess Selene. Ryan drew in a breath at the sight of her, slender, with features reminiscent of Velmaran elegance, high cheekbones, luminescent skin that sparkled softly, and hair woven into a regal halo. She wore a flowing gown that shimmered with every slight tilt of her body, like a field of stars against the night sky. Yet her eyes, though large and captivating, did not focus on anything around her, and her hands lay still in her lap, cradled by a gentle layer of embroidered silk. She was blind, and she was paralyzed. Rumors had preceded Ryan's arrival. The princess of Velmara Prime, blind from birth, bound to her hoverchair since a childhood illness. Many had whispered that she was only a ceremonial figure, a living symbol for the Velmaran people, a princess to be paraded before the HFY Empire and other interstellar powers to uphold alliances, while lacking any real influence in her father's court. Yet, as Ryan approached the dais, he sensed an unmistakable presence about her. There was a calmness in her posture, a certain grace that transcended her physical limitations. "Greetings, Captain Ryan Caldwell of Earth," King Eldarin intoned, his deep voice echoing amid the golden arches. "Your valor is known throughout the quadrant. We welcome you to Velmara Prime." Ryan bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said, his tone formal, "I am honored by your summons, though I must admit I am at a loss to understand what task you require of me." King Eldarin gestured for Ryan to rise. "There is a matter of great importance that demands a keen mind and steadfast heart," he began. "It concerns the negotiations with the HFY Empire, whose ambassadors you shall meet. We have reason to believe that your unique perspective might avert a diplomatic crisis. And," here the king paused, shifting his gaze to Selene, "I wish for you to spend time with my daughter, Princess Selene. There are truths about our alliances that require an understanding that surpasses mere custom." Ryan turned his gaze to Selene, uncertain. This was no ordinary request. To spend time with the princess was a privilege few were given, but it felt more like a cryptic puzzle than an honor. "I humbly accept, Your Majesty," he replied. "I stand ready to assist in any way I can." King Eldarin nodded in satisfaction, though his expression remained solemn. "Then, Captain, we shall speak further in private. For now, I entrust my daughter into your care. You shall be her companion, her eyes, and her shield, if need be." Ryan bowed once more. He was used to missions of great risk, espionage, infiltration, even planetary conflict. But to care for a princess whose heart he did not yet understand was a new kind of challenge altogether. Later that afternoon, Ryan found himself in an ornate antechamber, perched on a carved bench that overlooked Velmara Prime's majestic capital city. Through an arched window, he saw great crystalline spires jutting into the sky, each connected by delicate bridges of shimmering energy. A faint hum filled the air. The planet itself seemed alive with energy, vibrating at a frequency that sent a soft tingle through his fingertips. A quiet where heralded Princess Celine's arrival, her hoverchair gliding smoothly across the pearl-like floor. Two handmaidens attended her, adjusting the folds of her gown and ensuring her posture remained dignified. Yet Celine lifted a hand, motioning for them to grant her space. She sensed Ryan's presence immediately, tilting her head slightly, as though to catch the faintest sound of his breath. "You are Captain Caldwell," she said. Her voice was soft, almost lilting, yet laden with a quiet confidence. "Father has requested that you assist me with the upcoming negotiations. I suppose I must trust his judgment." "Your Highness," Ryan replied, rising to his feet. He bowed slightly before stepping closer to her. "If it's not too bold, may I ask how you would like me to assist you? I realize your father wishes for me to be your eyes, but you seem more perceptive than most who can see." A small, gentle smile curved upon her lips, causing her luminescent skin to shimmer in the golden light. "You flatter me, Captain. I have learned to navigate these halls and speak with ambassadors by understanding the subtle vibrations in the air, the heat emanating from their bodies, the tone of their voices. But the HFY Empire's ambassadors, they hold certain prejudices that might prove dangerous, not only for me, but for the entire realm if we fail to secure an accord." Ryan gently cleared his throat, recalling the intelligence briefings about the Zyphosians, an advanced species that valued intellect and mental prowess above all else. Physical imperfections did not concern them. Indeed, many among the HFY Empire had long since embraced cybernetic or genetic enhancements, but they had a fierce sense of tradition. They believed in arranged unions when they saw potential for interspecies evolution. "I understand the Zyphosians are different from Earth, from Velmara Prime," he noted. "They see beyond the surface, but they can be ruthless in their quest for what they consider beneficial." Celine nodded, her expression growing introspective. "Their ambassador, Kale, will soon arrive. Our records suggest that he has sought my hand, viewing my condition as a curiosity, an opportunity to blend my unique genetic traits with their own. It is not love, or even respect, that motivates him. It is the pursuit of an ideal, a theoretical advantage for their lineage." She paused, taking a measured breath. "And Father is inclined to entertain the proposal if it means preserving peace, for the HFY Empire is vast and powerful. Yet I am not inclined to be their pawn." Though her eyes did not see him, Ryan felt her gaze pierce into him. In that moment, he recognized something in her, a burning desire for autonomy, for recognition. Everyone else seemed to see only her blindness and paralysis, while ignoring the fierce intellect that shone beneath the surface. He realized that she needed someone to fight for her, to affirm her worth beyond mere political calculations. "Then I will stand by you," he said, voice firm. "If I can help you navigate these negotiations and ensure your freedom to choose your destiny, then I shall do so. Not as your caretaker, but as your ally." He watched the tension ease from her expression, a weight lifting from her delicate features. She offered him a kind, appreciative smile, though a hint of sadness lingered in her milky white eyes. "Thank you, Captain Caldwell. It is rare to find one who sees me for more than just a helpless princess." As the suns dipped below the crystalline horizon, painting the sky in bands of gold and violet, Captain Ryan Caldwell quietly vowed to protect the princess's dignity and safeguard her aspirations, no matter the cost. Little did he know that this oath would lead him through trials that would test his mettle, and force him to reckon with powers greater than he had ever known. In the days that followed, Ryan immersed himself in the history and culture of Velmara Prime. He spent long hours poring over star charts, political treaties, and records of past diplomatic endeavors between Velmara Prime and the HFY Empire. He learned of how the Xiphosians once revered the Velmarans for their mastery of crystal technologies, believing their ability to harness the planet's natural energies could augment Xiphosian intellect. Over time, tension and competition had overshadowed mutual respect, leading to multiple near conflicts. Amid these scholarly pursuits, Ryan spent even more time in Celine's company. He joined her in the palace gardens, where she listened to the gentle hum of pollinating insectoids darting among exotic, bioluminescent flowers. She recounted the sensations that guided her through the day, the subtle fluctuations in atmospheric pressure, the minuscule vibrations against her fingertips when she touched the crystalline railings, the melodic cadence of Velmaran birds whose calls reverberated like resonant chimes. Ryan found himself marveling at her heightened perceptions, her capacity to interpret the world without sight or mobility. Celine's mind was a reservoir of knowledge, storing intricate details of her planet's political landscape, the lore surrounding the ancients who had built the first celestial palace, even the specific resonance frequencies of each crystal spire. And while Ryan offered his perspective, an Earth soldier unafraid to speak his thoughts, Celine slowly opened up to him, revealing a side of her that no suitor or court official had ever witnessed. One afternoon, while they were seated near a fountain that sparkled with refracted sunlight, Celine spoke in a hushed tone. "Captain, have you ever been bound by something beyond your control? Something that is both a limitation and a hidden well of strength?" Ryan looked at her, pondering how to respond. Memories of his time on war-torn planets, where he'd led squads into near-impossible missions, flickered through his mind. He recalled the sense of duty that drove him, the constant threat of death that overshadowed every victory, every step. "I have," he replied at length. "There's a certain clarity that comes when you're faced with an insurmountable obstacle. It reveals who you really are and what you're truly capable of." Celine nodded thoughtfully, letting silence drift between them. The gentle splash of water filled the pause. "For me, it was the day I could no longer run as a child. My legs simply gave out. My eyes would not grant me the light others beheld. But I also began to hear the quiet murmurs in the palace walls, the faint hum of crystals resonating in the distance, the shiver of energy coursing through them. I learned to sense the subtle changes in the environment. I realized my mind could stretch in ways I did not think possible. That is why the Xiphosians are so interested. They sense my potential, perhaps." Ryan considered her words. "Then it's your choice," he said quietly, "how you wield that potential and who you share it with." The princess exhaled, long and slow. "Yes," she whispered, "and I do not wish to give it to those who value me only for what I can offer them." He found himself reaching out, touching her hand lightly. She did not flinch but allowed the warmth of his touch to envelop her. In that moment, he felt the quiver of energies dancing through her body, an echo that coursed along his fingertips. Her expression softened, as if relieved by the simple act of being treated as a person, not a revered or pitted figure. The day arrived when Ambassador Kale of the HFY Empire stepped onto Velmara Prime. A hush fell over the palace as a grand procession escorted him through the shimmering halls. Ryan and Celine stood side by side, flanked by guards, awaiting the ambassador's arrival in the throne room. Ryan could see tension etched into King Eldarin's stern features. The entire planet knew that the future of their alliance teetered on a precarious balance. When the doors opened, Kale strode in, robed in flowing garments of iridescent weave, the insignia of the HFY Empire emblazoned across his chest. Tall and gaunt, with striking greenish skin and elongated limbs, he epitomized the HFY's ideal of refinement. His silver-white hair lay braided in intricate patterns, and his sharp, reflective eyes darted across the throne room, absorbing every detail. "Your Majesty, I come bearing the warm regards of the HFY's Imperator," Kale intoned, bowing gracefully to King Eldarin. His voice resonated with a refined, almost musical quality. "We are honored that you have granted us the opportunity to speak of potential unions, of both a diplomatic and more personal nature." King Eldarin inclined his head. "We welcome your presence, Ambassador Kale. May these talks be fruitful, for the benefit of both our peoples." The king's voice was measured, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of caution. He gestured toward Celine. "You have met my daughter, the Princess Celine." Kale's eyes flickered toward her, yet there was no warmth in them, merely curiosity. "Your Highness," he said, offering her a perfunctory bow. He seemed almost to study her, as though she were some rare artifact. "I have long desired to meet you in person." Your unique gifts are renowned, even beyond the boundaries of Velmara Prime. Celine's lips tightened, but she acknowledged him with dignity. Ambassador Kale, I trust your journey was uneventful? Indeed, Kale replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. Then, his gaze shifted to Ryan, who stood protectively by Celine's side. And who is this human soldier standing at your right hand? Has Earth's presence become so essential that their men must now serve as bodyguards for Velmaran royalty? Ryan inclined his head, determined to maintain diplomatic respect. Captain Ryan Caldwell, at your service, he said plainly. I have been tasked with supporting the princess in these negotiations. I assure you, I am well versed in maintaining decorum. Kale appraised him with a look that bordered on disdain. Indeed. How intriguing, he said, lingering on the word. I have heard of Earth's story traditions, though they are not always as advanced as those of the Xiphos. King Eldarin cleared his throat. Ambassador, the reason for your visit is well known to us. We understand you come with a proposal, a union between your house and the royal house of Velmara. But before we proceed, we wish to ensure that your intentions align with genuine partnership, and not some covert agenda that might upset the fragile stability we have painstakingly built. Kale placed a hand over his heart, a gesture that Ryan guessed was meant to convey sincerity. We seek only the forging of a deeper bond. The princess's lineage, combined with our own genetic gifts, could usher in an era of unparalleled synergy. It would be a boon to both our peoples. Ryan noticed Celine's grip tighten against the armrest of her hover chair. She did not speak, but Ryan could feel the tension emanating from her. King Eldarin, too, seemed less than fully convinced. He glanced at Ryan, a silent signal that more private discussions would soon follow. As the negotiations progressed, Ryan observed Kale maneuver through each conversation with an almost predatory grace. The Xiphos ambassador skillfully offered token concessions, emphasizing the shared prosperity that could result from a meaningful union. Yet it became apparent that Kale's real interest lay in Celine's dormant potential, her connection to Velmara Prime's crystal energies. Privately, Ryan and Celine confided in one another, discussing the next steps. Should they object outright to the proposal, risking war with the Xiphos? Or should they pretend to agree to the match in an effort to buy time, to uncover the Xiphosians' true intentions? One evening, after a tense day of diplomatic meetings, Ryan accompanied Celine to a secluded balcony overlooking the capital. The twin moons of Velmara Prime glowed with pale radiance, casting shimmering reflections upon the crystalline towers below. There is something more, Celine whispered, her voice tremulous with apprehension. Kale speaks of synergy and alliance, but all I sense from him is calculated desire. They want to harness my abilities to control something deeper. Ryan leaned closer to her, feeling the breeze rustle through her hair. What do you mean? Her eyes remained sightless, but Ryan could sense her intense focus. Velmara Prime's crystals are not merely decorative. They are living conduits of energy, forming a vast network beneath the planet's surface. My people have harnessed only a fraction of their power, yet I hear the crystals singing sometimes, vibrating with possibility. I believe the Xiphosians have discovered a method to manipulate those frequencies, to control them. They believe that if they fuse my genetic pattern with their own, they could unlock greater telepathic control over this vast energy field. And if they control the energy at the planet's core, Ryan breathed out sharply, they'd control Velmara Prime entirely. A subtle tremor ran through Celine's voice. They would subjugate us. My father suspects this, but we lack proof. That is why you are here, Ryan. To help me find a way to protect my people without succumbing to Kale's demands. Ryan straightened, determined. He had pledged to guard her autonomy, to ensure her freedom. Now, it seemed that promise would be tested beyond mere words. Then we need to expose them, he said firmly. If they intend to use you as a weapon, we must gather evidence of their plans. We must be prepared for the confrontation that will inevitably follow. Celine tilted her head upward, as though drinking in the moonlight. There is an ancient tradition among our people, a trial that tests one's worthiness to claim the hand of royalty. It is called the ordeal of the crystalline labyrinth. If Kale insists on this union, he must face the ordeal. My father will likely demand it, for it is the only means to prove the suitor's worth beyond political gamesmanship. But, she paused, her lips parting as if uncertain. But what, Celine? She lowered her gaze. It is known that Kale's intellect far surpasses most. He might be able to manipulate the labyrinth's illusions. And I fear father may ask you, as my companion and protector, to stand in the labyrinth as well. A grim determination settled over Ryan. Then so be it. I will face the labyrinth if I must. If that is the path to safeguard your choice, then I won't shrink from it. He felt her small hand reach out, brushing against his. He clasped her fingers gently, letting the silence affirm a bond that words could not fully convey. High above, the stars glittered, silent witnesses to the forging of a new destiny. Word of the impending ordeal spread quickly through the palace halls. Velmarin nobles, courtiers, and visiting dignitaries all whispered about the spectacle that would soon unfold. Many secretly relished the thought of seeing the proud Xiphos ambassador tested, while others worried that a failure might incite the wrath of the Empire. The labyrinth itself lay beneath the palace, carved deep into the planet's crystal strata. Its passages were said to twist and shift, forming illusions that tested not only physical endurance but the integrity of one's heart and mind. Only those who emerged from its depths with humility and courage were deemed worthy of ascending to the royal dais. Kale accepted the challenge with a confident smirk, announcing that the Xiphos Empire had studied illusions far more sophisticated than any labyrinth could conjure. Ryan, for his part, stood quietly at King Eldarin's side, listening to the ambassador's boasting. He had faced death many times, but this was unlike any military endeavor. If he ventured into that maze, he would do so not merely to survive, but to defend the princess's right to choose her own path. The night before the trial, Ryan found Celine awaiting him in the palace library, a vast chamber lined with holographic texts and ancient, leather-bound tomes. The scent of old parchment mingled with the faint aroma of ozone from the glowing data panels. Soft orbs of floating light cast dancing shadows across the marble floor. Celine's hoverchair was parked beside a low table, upon which lay an ancient scroll covered in cryptic, spiraling symbols. "Captain," she said, as soon as she perceived his presence. "I was searching for references to the labyrinth's deeper chambers. Some believe that at its heart lies a shard of the great crystal, an artifact that resonates with the very heartbeat of Velmara Prime. If the Xiphosians truly seek control of the planet's energy network, they may attempt to seize that shard." Ryan circled the table, gazing at the swirling script. "And if they do, then we must not let them," Celine replied, a steely note in her voice. "If Kale or any Xiphosian soldier lays claim to the shard, it would mean the end of Velmara's sovereignty." He nodded, the weight of the trial growing heavier. "Then I'll have to make sure Kale never gets near it." "But how? I'm only one man." The princess's features softened. "You are not alone, Ryan. I sense that the crystals may respond to you as well. I do not fully understand why, but there is a resonance in you that they do not shun." Ryan recalled the faint tingling he felt when he touched Celine's hand, the electric hum that seemed to flow through her. Perhaps, he thought, this was the bond he had formed with her, the reason she trusted him and the reason the planet's energies might heed him. It was a bizarre notion, yet in this galaxy filled with wonders, it was far from the strangest. "I will do all I can, Celine," he promised softly. "And if the labyrinth demands my courage, I'll give it willingly." She remained silent for a moment, then spoke in a voice as soft as the flicker of candlelight. "In all my life, Captain, no one has looked at me without pity or ambition until you. Thank you." A hush lay between them, an unspoken sentiment that warmed Ryan's chest. He realized with startling clarity that he cared for this princess far beyond mere duty. The idea both thrilled and unnerved him, for it stood to challenge all he had known as a soldier and an earthling among the stars. The morning of the ordeal was greeted by a solemn procession. Torches of incandescent crystal lined the dark corridors beneath the palace, casting prismatic sparks that danced along the walls. Courtiers and guards gathered to witness Kale and Ryan descend into the labyrinth, while King Eldarin and Princess Celine awaited news of their progress in a nearby chamber, accompanied by watchers who would monitor the labyrinth's energy fluctuations. The labyrinth's entrance was a massive crystal archway, etched with swirling inscriptions that glowed faintly in the gloom. Kale stood at its threshold, exuding a serene confidence. His luminous eyes flicked between Ryan and the flickering crystals, betraying a hunger for the power that lay within. Ryan took a measured breath, hands clenched at his sides. He had faced unspeakable horrors on distant battlefields, and though this challenge was different, the soldier in him rose to the fore. "We'll see how cunning you are in the dark," he murmured under his breath as he stepped forward. A guardian priest, robed in deep violet, began the ancient chant that would open the labyrinth. The archway shimmered, the swirling lights intensifying until the passage beyond yawned open like a living maw. With no further ceremony, Kale strode inside. Ryan followed. Instantly, the darkness enveloped them, a velvety blackness that pulsed with hidden energies. The moment Ryan set foot past the arch, the corridor shifted before his eyes. Walls of luminescent crystal flickered, forming illusions that seemed to dance and rearrange themselves in the periphery of his vision. Some illusions took shape as ghostly apparitions, old memories, flickers of regret or hope. Ryan glimpsed phantasms of comrades he had lost in past wars, their faces twisted into sorrowful masks. He steeled himself, focusing on the present. He could only guess what visions assaulted Kale, but the Xiphos ambassador pressed on without pause, seemingly unaffected. They wound through twisting tunnels, each intersection a labyrinth of possibilities. At times, the crystals formed stairways that led nowhere, or illusions of gateways that vanished upon approach. Several times, Ryan nearly lost sight of Kale. The ambassador moved with deft precision, as though he anticipated each trap, each shift in the labyrinth's illusions. Ryan grounded himself in the memory of Celine's words, the resonance, the energy that connected him to the crystals. Closing his eyes, he felt for that faint hum. Slowly, he discerned a subtle rhythmic pulsing beneath the illusions, a genuine path that led deeper. Following this intangible compass, he navigated forward, ignoring the fleeting shapes that beckoned him astray. In a particularly narrow passage, Kale suddenly turned, his reflective eyes locking onto Ryan. "Impressive," he sneered, "for a human soldier. But you will never surpass the intellectual mastery of the Xiphos. This labyrinth is child's play to me." Ryan gave no response save a glare, forging onward. Still, he could not deny that Kale advanced with formidable confidence. Fear gnawed at the edges of Ryan's mind. If Kale reached that central shard first, the consequences would be catastrophic. The labyrinth seemed to sense their clash of wills, intensifying its illusions. At one point, the floor disappeared beneath Ryan, revealing a yawning chasm filled with swirling star matter. He leaped back in alarm, only to realize it was another trick. Then came corridors that twisted and inverted themselves, defying logic. Each time, Ryan forced himself to trust the subtle hum, that intangible guide, which allowed him to find stable ground amid the shifting mirage. Hours, or perhaps days, seemed to pass in that surreal underworld. Hunger and thirst were illusions themselves, overshadowed by the grander illusions that warped time and space. Finally, the crystalline walls opened into a vast chamber, illuminated by a pulsing white radiance that emanated from a central column of raw crystal. Its energy throbbed like a living heart. Ryan paused, breath stolen by the majesty of it. Kale, who had arrived mere moments before, stood mesmerized before the crystalline column. His gaunt face bore an expression of rapture. "Yes," he murmured, voice trembling. "This is the power I have sought. The key to dominance over Velmara Prime. With this, the Xiphos Empire will stand unrivaled." Ryan tensed. This was the confrontation he had dreaded. He edged closer to the shard, feeling its vibrations intensify with each step. "I won't let you take it," he growled. "This isn't yours to wield." Kale laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the chamber. "And how do you plan to stop me? My mind is honed by the greatest intellect of the Xiphos. I will shape these illusions to my will and cast you aside like a moth before the flame." As if to prove his point, Kale raised his arms, and the crystals around them shimmered violently. Spectral shapes coalesced, monstrous figures that lunged at Ryan, snapping with razor teeth and shrieking with unholy cries. Ryan fought them off with desperate blows, his fists passing through illusions that felt all too real, until he remembered the hum, the resonance. Focusing on the deep rhythm, Ryan reached into his inner self. He envisioned Celine, the unwavering faith in her gaze, the electric connection he felt when their hands touched. He directed that feeling outward, toward the crystals. In response, a surge of energy crackled through the chamber, shattering Kale's illusions. The ambassador stumbled back, shocked. What trickery is this? Ryan stepped forward, fists clenched. No trickery. You Xiphos think only of intellect, of dominance. But the crystals respond to something deeper, a unity of mind and heart. You cannot control them purely through cunning. A flicker of rage crossed Kale's features. You will not best me, Earth Soldier. He threw another wave of illusions at Ryan, more terrifying apparitions that loomed in the gloom. But Ryan remained anchored to the resonance, banishing the specters one by one. Slowly, Kale realized that brute force illusions would fail. Driven to desperation, Kale attempted a physical assault. He lunged, slashing at Ryan with a hidden dagger that glinted black in the crystal glow. Ryan parried the blow with his forearm, pain exploding as the blade's edge cut into flesh. But he gritted his teeth and countered, striking Kale's wrist and forcing the dagger away. They grappled near the crystalline column, each vying for the advantage. Kale managed to sweep Ryan's legs out from under him, and Ryan crashed to the floor, knocking the wind from his lungs. Seizing the moment, Kale reached for the column, hoping to commune with its raw power. Ryan summoned the last of his strength, launching himself forward. He tackled Kale away from the shard, sending them both tumbling across the slick crystal floor. The ambassador landed heavily, disoriented. Before Kale could recover, Ryan placed himself between the shard and the Xiphos. Blood trickled down Ryan's arm, staining the reflective surface below. Yield, Ryan panted. You're not claiming that shard. Kale glared at him with seething hatred. Then, unexpectedly, he sneered. Very well, human. You have bested me in this labyrinth, but you have yet to face the might of the Zaryth Empire. With that, he staggered backward, disappearing into the labyrinth's darkness. For a long moment, Ryan remained still, waiting to see if Kale would return. The only sound was the resonant thrum of the crystal shard. Finally, aware of the searing pain in his arm, Ryan approached the column. He reached out, almost reverently, and placed a hand upon its gleaming surface. A wave of warmth coursed through him, easing his wounds and filling him with a soothing calm. He had protected it, protected Celine's birthright. With the shard pulsating gently, the illusions around him subsided, revealing a single pathway that led back to the surface. Ryan, guided by the crystal's energy, followed that path, emerging at last into the torchlit corridors where the Watchers had anxiously awaited his return. There was no doubt in anyone's mind who had won the ordeal of the crystalline labyrinth. News swept through the palace that Captain Ryan Caldwell, mere Earth Soldier, had outmaneuvered the brilliant Ambassador Kale. King Eldarin declared Ryan a champion, yet the mood was not purely celebratory, for Kale's escape meant that the Zaryth Empire would not simply accept defeat. Storm clouds of conflict gathered on the horizon. Celine, relieved beyond measure to see Ryan emerge alive, reached for him the moment he entered her chambers. He knelt beside her hover chair, offering a wan smile. I couldn't let him have that shard, he said quietly. She brushed her fingertips over his bandaged arm, wincing in sympathy. You are wounded. I'm so sorry. This was supposed to be a mere test, but it nearly cost you your life. He shook his head gently. It was worth it, Celine. Nothing has ever felt more worthwhile. Their eyes, her unseeing, yet achingly expressive, and his, brimming with sincerity, communed in a language beyond words. In that instant, the final wall of formality between them crumbled, leaving only the palpable thrumming of hearts in unison. Within days, an urgent message arrived from the Zaryth Imperator, condemning Ryan's interference and demanding that Velmara Prime uphold the Union arrangement or face dire consequences. King Eldarin, outraged by Kale's brazen attempts to seize the shard, refused to give in. War loomed as a near certainty, with the Zaryth navy rumored to be gathering at the edges of Velmarant space. In a closed council session, King Eldarin, Princess Celine, and Ryan debated their next move alongside trusted advisors. Some urged a hasty mobilization of Velmara's modest defense fleet, while others recommended covert negotiations. Yet all the while, Celine remained silent, a pensive frown marking her brow. Finally, she spoke. I must confront the Zaryth, not as a bride or a pawn, but as one who carries the synergy they seek. King Eldarin inhaled sharply. My daughter, you cannot be serious. Their technology, their fleets, they will stop at nothing. Celine lifted her chin, her composure regal. And yet if we huddle behind our walls, they will take Velmara by force. I have sensed it in the crystals, an evolutionary step that neither they nor we fully comprehend. I must share it with them not through subjugation, but through demonstration. Ryan's eyes widened. You mean you want to negotiate with them again? After everything Kale tried to do? She turned toward him, her sightless gaze steady. Negotiation, yes. But on our terms. They want to unlock the potential I carry. Very well. Let us show them the path to true evolution is not found in forced unions or stolen artifacts. It is found in trust, cooperation, and, she paused, voice trembling slightly, love. A hush fell over the room. King Eldarin studied his daughter with a mixture of fear and pride. Finally, he spoke. Very well, my child. We shall convene with the Xiphos. But it must be at a neutral location, and we must ensure your safety. Ryan placed a hand on the princess's shoulder. I will be by your side, Celine, he said. Whatever happens. Under a fragile truce, a delegation from Velmara and the Xiphos Empire met on the neutral station known as Bastion Pax. Positioned in the orbit of a dying star, Bastion Pax was renowned for hosting peace summits throughout the sector's tumultuous history. Its corridors were utilitarian, absent of the ornamentation so common in the Celestial Palace, but designed to accommodate a wide array of species and cultures. Tension crackled in the air as Princess Celine, escorted by Ryan and a phalanx of guards, advanced through the station's sterile hallways. At the designated conference chamber, they were met by a new Xiphos delegation, flanked by none other than Ambassador Kale. His expression betrayed his bitterness at their previous encounter, yet he bowed stiffly in greeting. Seated around a vast circular table, the two sides began their discussion with carefully scripted formalities. Yet it was clear that mistrust overshadowed every word. The Xiphos Imperator's envoy demanded restitution for Kale's defeat in the labyrinth, framing it as a breach of some sacred tradition. King Eldarin countered with condemnation of Kale's treacherous attempt to claim the shard. Accusations flew, and the possibility of peace seemed to slip away by the moment. Suddenly, Celine spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. Enough. We have argued, but we have yet to truly see each other's hearts. The Xiphos prize intelligence, evolution, and the mastery of potential. Velmara prizes harmony with the crystal energies of our planet. Are these not two sides of the same pursuit, greater understanding and growth? Ambassador Kale let out a soft snort, but he did not interrupt her. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. It is said you wish to claim me, Celine continued, her tone unwavering. Because you believe my blindness and paralysis hide a deeper resonance with the crystals. You are correct that I have a connection, but it is not something to be seized or forced. It is awakened by compassion, by trust, by the courage to stand with one another. Captain Caldwell of Earth has shown me this. The mention of Ryan caused more than a few Xiphos to murmur. Kale's lips curled into a sneer. You speak of love, princess, but that is a primitive concept, a fleeting emotion. The Xiphos have evolved beyond such illusions. Ryan bristled, but Celine raised her hand to soothe him. Perhaps you misunderstand love. It is not a mere emotion. It is a unifying force that can bridge differences, a drive that inspires sacrifice and grants resilience. Her voice rose, tinged with conviction. I will not be your pawn, Kale. If you truly seek the synergy of my lineage, you must acknowledge me as an equal, not as a prize. Only then might we share in a genuine evolution. Kale's gaze flickered from Celine to Ryan, who stood tall and unwavering. Across the table, the Xiphos delegates exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain how to respond to a plea that transcended cold logic. Then, a subtle tremor ran through the deck plates of Bastion Pax. Alarms began to wail. Through the chamber's viewport, they all witnessed an unsettling sight, energy beams lancing across the void. An unidentified faction had arrived, attacking the neutral station. In seconds, the station's external defenses were engaged, but the intruders, a band of rogue Xiphos splinter cells, were already docking. Chaos erupted in the corridors. Celine and Ryan, flanked by Velmarin guards, rushed to secure the princess's safety. Kale and his delegation likewise sprang into action, contacting their warships for assistance. The fragile ceasefire dissolved into panic as the station's artificial gravity fluctuated, sending soldiers and diplomats sprawling. A distant explosion rocked the entire structure, casting sparks from overhead lighting. Ryan clutched the armrest of Celine's hoverchair, guiding her away from falling debris. We need to get out of here, he shouted. Celine shook her head. No, we must stop them. They're rogue Xiphos who believe that war is the only path to power. She turned toward Kale, who hovered nearby with a mixture of shock and fury. You see, Ambassador? These are your own people, consumed by lust for supremacy. Will you help us in this? Or do you still cling to your pride? For a moment, Kale hesitated, conflict etched in every line of his face. Then a furious scowl creased his brow. I will not see my empire disgraced by radicals. He reached out a hand. Princess, if you have a plan, speak it quickly. Celine nodded, heart pounding in her chest. Captain Caldwell, we must reach the station's central hub. If I can interface with their systems, perhaps I can use my crystal resonance to stabilize the power grid and seal off the rogue Xiphos infiltration points. Kale, you must rally your loyalists to stand down these attackers before they compromise the entire station. No one argued. This was not the time for debates, it was a moment for action. With Ryan at her side, Celine led the way to the station's core, guided by the siren call of flickering energies. She navigated past collapsed corridors, stepping over bodies and debris, her senses attuned to the station's pulse as though it were a planetary crystal. At the central hub, a swirling vortex of lights and cables formed the station's mainframe. Technicians had either fled or been incapacitated. Celine extended a trembling hand, her fingertips brushing the console. Ryan steadied her hover chair, trying to remain calm amid the klaxons and the distant rumbles of conflict. Summoning every shred of concentration, Celine reached out with her mind, searching for the station's electronic currents, for the subtle interplay of signals that governed airlocks, force fields, and communications. She sensed the erratic fluctuations caused by the infiltration, like an infection ravaging a living body. With slow, deliberate effort, she began to coax the systems back into alignment, weaving her resonance into the station's architecture. At first, sparks flew in protest. A console erupted, sending shards of metal flying. Ryan shielded Celine, grunting as a piece of debris grazed his arm. But the station's energy began to bend to her will. Emergency bulkheads slid into place, sealing corridors where rogue Xiphos had breached. External weapon systems realigned, firing upon the enemy ships that attempted docking maneuvers. In the chaos, Kale's loyalists managed to corner the rogue cells, forcing them into pockets of resistance. Blaster fire illuminated the station's corridors. Ryan fought off a group of attackers who attempted to storm the central hub, while Celine maintained her connection, sweat beading on her luminescent brow. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the infiltration collapsed. The rogue vessels retreated under the station's relentless barrage. Shaken survivors of Bastion packs emerged from hiding. Kale, armor scorched and hair disheveled, stepped into the hub, exchanging a tense nod with Ryan. It appears we have stabilized the situation, he said gravely. Thanks to her. Exhausted, Celine released her hold on the console. The flickering light steadied, the alarm subsiding into a subdued alert status. She breathed raggedly, leaning back in her hover chair. Ryan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, concern etched in his features. She smiled faintly, grateful for his presence. In the aftermath, the battered delegates reconvened in a smaller, intact chamber. The atmosphere was transformed. The Xiphos, having witnessed Celine's courage and the synergy between her and Ryan, softened their stance. Ambassador Kale, begrudgingly respectful, knelt before the princess. You are more than I imagined, Your Highness, Kale murmured. I have glimpsed a sliver of that which drives you. You have my apologies, and my vow to cease the demands for a forced union. Celine nodded, her voice hoarse. Then let us begin anew, she said simply. Let us seek a real partnership, one that shares knowledge and fosters growth without subjugation. The Xiphos delegates bowed in assent, and King Eldarin, though weary from the ordeal, clasped his daughter's hand. He turned to Ryan, gratitude shining in his eyes. Captain, you have stood by my daughter through trials beyond measure. Your bravery and devotion demand my utmost respect. Ryan dipped his head in acknowledgement, unable to fully articulate the depth of his devotion to Celine. He knew in his heart that words would never suffice. Over the following weeks, a new accord was painstakingly drafted. Earth, Velmara Prime, and the Xiphos Empire set their names upon it, vowing cooperation in research, trade, and mutual defense. The forced marriage clause was rescinded, replaced by a clause recognizing Celine's sovereignty over her own genetic gifts. In truth, it was not only a political shift, but the birth of a new era of interstellar diplomacy. Behind the scenes, a personal bond blossomed between Celine and Ryan. Their closeness was no longer confined to official events. They spent hours in quiet conversation, exploring the depths of each other's dreams and fears. At times, they simply sat together in the palace gardens or aboard Earth starships, finding solace in each other's presence. Over time, their love, rare, unexpected, yet unmistakable, flourished. Whispers spread through the court that the princess had found her heart's companion. Some nobles questioned the propriety of such a union, but King Eldarin, having seen the lengths Ryan went to protect Selene, gave his blessing. And then, in a twist that defied all conventional boundaries, Selene discovered she was with child. The news rippled through Velmara Prime and beyond. A child born of an Earth soldier and the blind, paralyzed princess. A fusion of species, a blending of potentials. Speculation ran rampant. Some hailed it as a miracle, a testament to the evolutionary synergy Kale had once tried to forcefully claim. During her pregnancy, Selene found her body undergoing subtle but profound changes. Strength crept into her limbs, and she gained partial movement in her once paralyzed legs. Her blind eyes, while still unseeing in the human sense, took on a new brilliance. She reported glimpses of swirling colors, as though the crystals themselves granted her an alternate form of vision. Ryan stood at her side, marveling at each transformation. The palace's healers, along with Earth's medical specialists, were baffled by the phenomenon. It was as though love and the child's unique genetic code were unlocking abilities within Selene that had lain dormant for years. The princess herself was filled with a radiant joy she had never known. Each day, she and Ryan would walk in the gardens, albeit slowly, with support, celebrating every step, every flutter of new life growing within her. In the quiet hush of early mornings, they would share whispered hopes for the future, for a child who might become a living bridge between worlds. When the day of birth arrived, the palace was abuzz with anticipation. Healers and medtechs assembled to provide the best possible care. Ryan clasped Selene's hand through the long hours, his heart pounding with equal measures of concern and elation. At last, with a final cry that resonated like a chorus of distant bells, the child came into the world. A hush descended as the infant let out a wail, alive and strong. Selene and Ryan, tears streaming down their faces, cradled their newborn daughter, who bore luminous skin tinged with subtle patterns reminiscent of Velmarin crystals, yet retained a distinctly human warmth. Her eyes, when they opened, revealed swirling galaxies of color, sight beyond sight, an inheritance from her mother's connection to Velmara's energy fields. King Eldarin, present in the chamber, knelt before his grandchild, his voice trembling with reverence. "She is a new beginning," he whispered, "a hope for all our worlds." News of the child's birth spread like wildfire, reaching even the distant corners of Xiphos space. And in the wonder that followed, the seeds of peace and collaboration were nurtured. Other species, witnessing the fusion of love and evolution, came forward to propose new alliances, new scientific endeavors. The very idea that once threatened to spark interstellar conflict had become a beacon of harmony. In the following months, as their daughter thrived, Ryan and Selene found their bond deepening beyond anything they had imagined. Selene's mobility continued to improve, guided by the child's presence and the abiding warmth of their shared love. While she remained partially bound to her hover chair, she stood on her own for the first time since childhood, tears of triumph shining in her eyes. On a bright afternoon, in the presence of King Eldarin and assembled dignitaries from Earth, Velmara, and even Xiphos, Ryan and Selene exchanged vows. There was no forced union, no hollow political ceremony. It was a celebration of two souls, forging a new destiny that spanned the stars. As they sealed their commitment with a tender kiss, the onlookers burst into applause, and the palace's crystalline arches chimed in harmonious resonance. And so, in the luminous halls of the Celestial Palace, the legend of Ryan Caldwell and Princess Selene was born. Their story rippled through galaxies, retold by bards, sung in cosmic arias, inspiring countless others to see beyond limitations. It was proof that what some deemed weakness could become an unparalleled source of strength, and that the deepest, most transcendent evolution was found not in cold machinations, but in compassion and unity. As the sun set on their wedding day, painting the sky with shades of rose and gold, Ryan took Selene's hand, guiding her gently through the palace gardens. In the distance, their infant daughter cooed in the arms of her grandfather, enthralled by the vibrant play of starlight across crystal spires. No one ever dared to love the blind, paralyzed alien princess, Ryan whispered softly, pressing a kiss to Celine's temple. Except one human. A serene smile graced her features, tears of joy sparkling. And that love became our strength, she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. A strength that will carry us toward a boundless future, together. Above them, the stars gleamed in silent testament, watching as the new family walked forward, united in hope, their child heralding the dawn of a new galactic era. Indeed, it was a happy ending, for love had proven itself mightier than fear, transcending limitations and rewriting destiny itself, shining like a beacon in the infinite tapestry of the cosmos.